Hi there, readers. Today we are going to be doing session 6 in Reading Workshop on our topic about series readers becoming experts on characters. So we've already had 3 sessions, and we're going to kind of skip ahead to session 6, but I just wanted to quickly go over a few things that we've already talked about with our anchor chart. So we've already talked about collecting information about the main characters, just really getting to know them. And we've also noticed things that are the same across the series. And that might just be like in Frog and Toad when we were looking at how the characters were similar across different stories throughout the same book. But you might also be doing that with chapter books or books that are in, like a chapter book that's in a series. We also talked about using what you know to guess what a character is going to do next. So, like predicting how they'll act based on the character traits that we know they have. And today, we are going to move forward and we're going to talk about noticing what a character's relationship kind of shows you about that character. So today's teaching point is that readers get to know the different people in a character's life, and that really teaches you about that character by just looking at how they interact with the different people that they see every day. So kind of looking at how does this character act around his or her friends? How does this character act around teachers or a few other people? We're going to take a look specifically at the book called Pinky and Rex and the Bully. So you might guess that we are also going to be looking at how our main character kind of acts around a bully, kind of based on that title. So this is kind of what we're going to work with, and we're just going to go through a little bit of this book together today. So as I read, we're going to be introduced to the bully first, and I want you to pay attention to how Pinky, our main character, acts when he's around the bully. So I just want to show you this full sheet that we'll be working with, how Pinky acts when he's with. We'll be looking at the bully, then Mrs. Morgan, and then his dad. But first we'll pay attention to the bully, and I'll kind of work through some words that would describe how he acts when he's around the bully. So again, this book is called Pinky and Rex and the Bully. So I'm just going to read the first part to you, and we'll talk about how he acts around the bully. So be thinking about that as I read. And remember, like any good previewer would do before you start a book, you look at the contents. And chapter 1 is called Sissy. Okay. Chapter 1, Sissy. You're a sissy, Pinky, the boy shouted. Get up and fight. Pinky lay on the sidewalk where the third grader had knocked him off his bike. His cheeks were fever hot. Pinky is a girl, Pinky is a girl, the older boy chanted. I am not, Pinky said. The boy kicked at Pinky. Get up, sissy, or I'll tell everybody in school tomorrow that you're a girl. Anyway, nobody but a girl would ride a pink bike or have a name like Pinky. Pinky's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Why couldn't Kevin just go away? Suddenly, he heard a door open and someone running in his direction. All right, we're going to stop quickly there. And I want us to think about how Pinky's acting around the bully. To me, I think he's acting afraid. He's not really standing up for himself. He seems like really nervous around this boy. And obviously it's because he's bullying him. He's not being nice. But I would say that Pinky acts afraid. Let's see. Acts afraid around the bully or like nervous because he's letting this bully boss him around and do mean things to him because maybe he's like scared of him, which would be a synonym for afraid. So these are all ways that Pinky's acting around the bully. And we're going to keep reading to see if that's how he acts around the other 2 characters that we're going to look at. So remember, we're kind of just trying to get a feel for who Pinky is. So around the bully, he's afraid, he's nervous, he's scared. And now in this next part, we're going to go into how he acts around Mrs. Morgan. So be paying attention now to how he acts around Mrs. Morgan. Stop that! You leave him alone, a voice called out. Pinky recognized it as Mrs. Morgan's. Now his cheeks really burned. It was embarrassing enough to be bullied, but to be saved by an old woman made it even worse. "It's okay, Mrs. Morgan," Pinky said, scrambling to his feet. I just fell off my bike." "I was trying to help him up," Kevin lied. He pretended to pat Pinky on the shoulder, but pinched him hard instead. See how I think that Pinky's still acting afraid of the bully even as Mrs. Morgan is there. "I know what you did," Mrs. Morgan said, pushing Kevin's hand away. "I saw the whole thing. Now you get out of here before I call your parents." Kevin snickered, jumped on his bike, and rode off. When he reached the end of the block, he turned back and shouted, "Sissy!" Mrs. Morgan didn't seem to notice. "I just made lemonade," she said. "Would you like some?" Pinky would have liked to run across the street to his own house, bury his head in his pillow, and sleep until tomorrow. But seeing as how Mrs. Morgan had just saved his life, he couldn't say no. "Okay," he mumbled. "Good," said Mrs. Morgan. "We'll sit out on the back porch and you'll tell me what this was all about." Pinky groaned. Chapter 2, Cookies and Lemonade. So I'm going to read just a little bit longer and we'll kind of come up with some things that would describe how Pinky's acting right now with Mrs. Morgan. Mrs. Morgan gave Pinky cookies with his lemonade. "You know, I hadn't baked cookies for years until you and your father made some for me," she told him. "I'd forgotten how much better they are than the store-bought kind." I'm going to keep reading a little further, but before I do, I want to notice how Mrs. Morgan's kind of recalling a time that Pinky and his dad did something super nice for Mrs. Morgan. They made her cookies. So I'm going to say that I think that Pinky is kind to Mrs. Morgan. He's kind. And also, let's think about how he didn't really want to go over to her house, but because she was so kind to him, kind of saving him from the bully, he's being polite. He's like, "Oh, I really don't want to go, but it's the right thing to do." So he's going to go over there. So I'm going to say that he is being polite. Okay, so far we think that Mrs. Morgan, she's kind and polite. Well, actually, so far we think that Pinky, when he's with Mrs. Morgan, like the way he acts towards her is kind and polite. And we'll see that as we continue reading on the next page. As he says, "Yes, ma'am," Pinky said. They looked like good cookies, but he had no interest in eating them. So he's still being polite and kind toward her. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And let's see how Pinky acts when he's with his dad later. So this is chapter 4 called Billy. That night after dinner, Pinky was helping his father clean up. "Is it bad that I like pink?" he asked. "Of course not," his father said. "Pink has always been your favorite color." "Yeah, but now that I'm 7, maybe I should like a different color." "What does being 7 have to do with it?" Pinky put down his dish towel and slumped into a chair. Finally, he said, "Maybe you shouldn't call me Pinky anymore." "When you were little, we called you Billy," his father said. Pinky thought for a long time. Then he said, "From now on, I'm Billy." So right now I see that Pinky's acting differently with his dad than he did with the bully and Mrs. Morgan. I feel like right now with his dad, he thinks that he can kind of show his true feelings and have like a real conversation about his problem and kind of how to fix it. So I'm going to say that he's like comfortable around his dad. Comfortable. So he feels like he can really talk to him about what's really going on. I'm also going to say that he's honest with his dad about how things are going and what he's not happy with. Okay. So I'm going to stop with our reading there, but I just want you to kind of go back and notice. So far, we kind of took note about how Pinky acted when he was with the bully. He was afraid and nervous and scared. And then with Mrs. Morgan, Pinky acted kind and polite. And then with his dad, we could tell he's comfortable, so he's more honest with him. So as you're reading today, I want you to kind of pay attention to the different characters that your main character interacts with and see kind of what you can learn about your character. So let's kind of go back to our anchor chart. And again, our main takeaway is just noticing what a character's relationships show. So like what can we learn about Pinky based on all of those things that we noticed? Do this. I'm going to try to pull up both screens. Give me a second. There we go. So I would say that, like, based on what we kind of collected about Pinky, I noticed that he's kind of afraid of people that are mean to him, which I would be too. So notice how I'm like even kind of relating this character to myself. Like, I would be afraid and nervous around a bully. And of course, Mrs. Morgan's older and she was very kind to him. She saved him. So he's being kind and polite, which makes sense to me. And then around his family, he's more comfortable and he's having a real conversation, which I do with my family too. So I want you to kind of just notice how your main character acts around the other characters in the story, and then kind of think about, do you act kind of similar to your main character or different? So that's kind of our takeaway from today. And your assignment for this lesson is just going to be to complete discussion director, but also be thinking about this as you read. And we'll kind of discuss this strategy a little bit more at our next book club meeting. All right, thanks, guys.